Good afternoon. This is the Thurston County Board of Health for 14 November 2017. I'm Commissioner Bud Blake, the chair of the Board of Health this year. I'd like to start off first by doing introductions. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. To my right is Commissioner John Hutchins. To his right is Clerk of the Board, Lydia Hodgkinson. To her right is Shelley Slaughter, the Director of Public Health and Social Services. And to her right is Romero Chavez, the County Manager. Today we have in store for starting the agenda is the presentation section. We have a proclamation. Yep, and then proclamation, as you know, is November as Movember. And so with that in mind, I'm going to ask Shelley Slaughter, the Director of Public Health and Services, to introduce, is it Jacob first?
Each year, 249 men in Thurston County die from cancer.
Yes.
And every year, 24 die from breast cancer. Many people don't know that breast cancer also affects men.
It is
Last
very
month,
sad.
we heard about breast cancer for women. This month, we are focusing on men's health.
And it is very sad for the numbers that you read there and the men that are affected. It is Men's Month for the month of November. And so it is Mr. Jacob Bryson, and he comes to us from Thurston County also, but he's going to talk to us a little bit about the Cancer Coalition that he represents, and not just breast cancer, but all the other cancers. And so, Mr. Bryson, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to come here today. This is a very important message that I want to bring. My name is Jacob Bryson. I live here in the county, and I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I'm a testicular cancer survivor, and I'm currently working on yet another. What's important to me is for men to understand that we can indeed develop breast cancer. When we were born, we had the same breast tissue as women. Our hormones change as we begin to grow into adolescence, and women develop breasts as we know them. And my sincere apologies, 1 in every 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer sometime in their life, and that's a tragedy. Only 1 in 1,000 men will be diagnosed in their lifetime. Maybe not quite such a tragedy, but most of those men are diagnosed in stage 3 and stage 4. 78% of us are terminal when we're diagnosed. It's unconscionable. And why? I'll tell you my story. My wife and I were being intimate, and she said, "What's this little lump here next to my nipple?" I don't know. Never noticed that before. Why would I do that? Why would I do a breast exam? Why would a man do that? So I went to my physician. He said, "Oh, Jacob, don't worry. It's just a cyst. Happens all the time. It's just a fatty cyst. You don't need to be concerned about that." Well, I went home. 2 weeks later, I couldn't stand it. I went back and I talked to Steve, and I said, "Steve, I don't care if it's a cyst or a dragon's egg. Get it out." So he sent me down the hall, and the surgeon sat me in his office, started to cut and freeze some more and cut some more. This tiny little pea-sized cyst was in fact a tumor, that big. I didn't know what to do about it. The surgeon said, "Oh, it's encapsulated. Don't worry about it. It's just a cyst." 2 weeks later, I called and asked Steve, "So what the lab have to say?" Well, the lab didn't know what to make of it, so they sent it on to a second lab. And I said, "Where'd you send it?" He said, "Well, we sent it up to Hutch." And a week later, he called and he said, "Jacob, I am so sorry." And if any of you have been in surgery at all, the surgeon comes in and he says, "Well, what are we here for?" Well, I told him, "I'm here for a double mastectomy." And he said, "No, that's not what it says here. You're here for a right-sided mastectomy. Why do you want a double? Why would you want to do that?" I said, "Because I never want to see you again." And that was in 2008. Believe it or not, and many of the men that I know that are in the Male Breast Cancer Coalition had similar experiences. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. My ex-boss said, "Well, what's the big deal? Men don't need tits." Quote. Sorry about the language. It is a big deal. I was mutilated. Most of us are being mutilated, men and women. And particularly women who are defined in many ways by having breasts. I can't imagine what it might be like for a woman who's 25 or 30 years old to be diagnosed with breast cancer and realize she may never be able to nurse her babies. What a tragedy. I do know what it's like to be a man of 61 years old and be diagnosed with breast cancer, and I couldn't believe it. Can't happen to me. I spent 2 years, I wouldn't go outside without a shirt on, even on my own patio. I was that embarrassed. I started looking for any kind of help. There wasn't any. I phoned Susan Komen. No, Susan Komen's about women. By the way, that's changed. And I recently spoke to a governmental retreat on behalf of Susan Komen. Because if I'm not seen, my message isn't heard, and I'm out there. And that message needs to be heard. Eventually, I found somebody at Breast Cancer Research Foundation, and they put together an article in Esquire magazine, and one thing happened after another, and now I'm the Pacific Northwest representative for the Male Breast Cancer Coalition. There are hundreds of us out here. Australia, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Canada, US, we're all over the place. And my message, my goal is to get that message out there. Breast cancer is a real issue for men. Yes, very few of us will be diagnosed. Most of us will die. And men need to understand. One of my favorite things to do is I work part-time at Home Depot, and I get to have conversations, typically in the summertime, about sunscreen, particularly with babies. And one thing leads to another, and we get to talking about cancer. And many men and many women have talked to me about very intimate details about their cancer. One of the things that I really like to say is, men should do breast exams. As a matter of fact, if you're a couple, it can be fun. And it is, and it can be. But men need to begin to understand that this is possible. And in particular, there was a man in Home Depot 3 weeks ago now. Both his sisters diagnosed with breast cancer, and his mother died of breast cancer. And he has not been screened. One needs to be screened, particularly if you're a long history in your ancestry of breast cancer and other kinds of cancers. You need to be screened. Dr. Mary Claire King at the University of Washington is doing amazing work. She's looked at my genetic makeup, and my daughter's, who was diagnosed 4 years after I was, had a double mastectomy, and my son, who is currently being evaluated to determine what the genetic anomaly is that's following down through my family. I'm not so much concerned about me. Like the jump rope king, I'm just glad to be here. I'm 70 years old.
Wow.
But I am concerned about my grandkids. I have 6 grandkids, 4 females and 2 males. If I'm passing on some genetic anomaly, I want to know about it so that my grandkids can be hyper-vigilant in terms of surveillance. And I encourage everybody in the room to talk to your family members, the people you know. It was really hard for me to say I had breast cancer. It was very difficult. It was hard for me to say I had testicular cancer. Those aren't things that we talk about. We simply don't. But we have to. The time has come, we have to. Men and women need to discuss these kinds of issues, these kinds of risks, with each other, with their peers, with their family members, with their kids, with their wives, their husbands. The time has come. It has to happen. Susan Komen told me in 2008, we're sorry, that Susan Komen's about women. I phoned the American Cancer Society. I didn't get an answer. I sent them a letter. I didn't get an answer. Here we are 9 years later. I'm still kicking, and the American Cancer Society is having me go out and talk to people. Susan Komen is having me go out and talk to people. I have a check in my pocket for the last time I went out on behalf of Susan Komen. Things are changing. Join me. Help me change that. Change it in your lives. Change it in your family's lives. Change it in your the lives of the people who you work with and who work for you. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Jacob. We have a proclamation we want to read and give to you also.
Susan Komen wore your scarves.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
With that in mind, Jacob, I'm going to have Commissioner Hutchings read the proclamation, then we're going to get a photo with Mr. Nat Jackson. Is that all right? In a second. No, if you want. Yeah, sure.
You ready? I'm going to read to you. All right. Whereas, whereas 70% of men say their friends can rely on them for support, but only 48% say that they rely on their friends. Speaking up and speaking out should not be a stigma. Reaching out is crucial. And whereas 1 in 7 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in his lifetime, and treatment options for prostate cancer vary depending on a man's age, stage, and grade of cancer, as well as his other existing medical conditions. And whereas testicular cancer is the most common cancer in males between the ages of 15 and 34, and whereas 1 in 4 adults in the United States will experience a mental health problem in any given year, and 87 men in the United States die by suicide every day, and 3 out of every 4 suicides are men. And whereas across the world men die an average 6 years younger than women, and for reasons that are largely preventable, which means that it doesn't have to be that way. We can all take action to live healthier, happier, and longer lives. And whereas there is a strong movement to reduce men's risk of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer by up to 50%, and whereas moving can reduce your risk of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer by up to 50% and lower your risk of early death by up to 30%. And whereas obesity is widespread, nearly 3 out of every 4 men are either overweight or obese, and 50% of men don't engage in vigorous leisure time physical activity for more than 10 minutes, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And whereas Thurston County joins communities across our nation to challenge men to grow and women to support a mustache or to make a commitment to get active and move, both of which spark conversations and raise vital funds and awareness for men's health. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Health hereby proclaims November as Movember to increase public understanding of the importance men's health, and urge all members of our community to join in recognizing this significant occasion and join the movement to change the face of men's health. Adopted this 14th day of November 2017, your county commissioners.
Here, here.
All right, Nat.
Yeah, you can't get away here.
You can see my smile.
Mm-hmm.